So this video is just a tiny weeny bit late, but I thought I would still cover it for those either looking to complete a few runs or those just getting into the game who don't know what horror mode is. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. Starting off, I'm going to recommend watching my Master and Nightmare guides, as horror mode basically puts you to the final test to see if you can take what you have learned from those previous runs and refine it. As well as, horror difficulty pushes you to be the best player you can. So starting off, you shouldn't try to jump straight into horror mode if you haven't completed all the maps on Nightmare, if you can't consistently complete them in, well, pub lobbies and in pre-made groups. Another thing I recommend doing is trying to do Nightmare runs where you don't get hit as much, as Nightmare and Master difficulty are quite lenient with how many hits you can take, whilst in horror, it's 2 hits and you're out. With that all said and done, let's move on to the tips now. Number 1 is going to be to strategize and have specific roles and positions each player is going to play. What I mean by this is try and have each player looking either for specific spawns or holding specific gear. This allows each player to concentrate a lot more on fewer things than rarely having everyone trying to do everything at the same time. So how you can do this is by splitting spawns between people. And by the time you're hopping into horror, you should already know the horde and trigger spawns. So by dividing up who looks at which spawn, it allows you to have information right away. There is no downtime where everyone is trying to figure out where the horde is coming from. Apart from hordes, you also need to strategize things like who is going to be holding what items, as would all your rage boosters be better on the one person defending the safe room, or on the guy running around with all the snow breed. Playing out things like this means that if the player holding the rage boosters sees that the team is going to get overwhelmed, they can make the executive decision to start spamming them out, giving other players one less thing to focus on. This means if you think that things are going bad, you can just request for a rage booster and then you can get stabbed, instead of putting your gun down for precious seconds. Another thing to do with strategies is also look how you attack the map itself, as in, do we close the door, does someone run ahead and distract the snow breed, and do we run past the hordes and get to a better choke point? These are all valid strategies, but you need to also weigh them against the idea that horror mode gives you a lot less leeway to get away with risky strategies. So go with the notion that one strat might be not that worth it going for. Wow, that was a long tip. So let's move on to tip 2, being communication again. As I've already talked about this in my previous guides, but as I mentioned earlier, horror mode pushes you to be the best, so obviously that means your communication skills need to be put to the extreme, meaning callouts need to be snappy and responsive. You can't stutter or stammer words, as, well, this could end up screwing over your teammate who needs to hear that call out. Also, something different that changes from Nightmare to Horror is that Special Infected can spawn a lot more, and with the increased health, they are a lot more deadly than in any other mode. You're going to have to call out and focus down on them before they become a problem. Now, this doesn't mean that all of you should drop what you're doing and shoot them. It means you tie the previous tip and this tip together, where for special spawns from a specific spawn, maybe player 2 and player 3 focus on it, whilst player 1 and player 4 focus on the commons. Communication can literally be the death of you, and if you aren't careful, it could cost your run. So I recommend making sure your entire squad understands the callouts before jumping into the map. My next tip has to do with the wrist devices. You know, the things that everyone has been spamming because of the item changes? Well, they matter a lot in horror mode, and not for the reason that you may think, which I'll get onto a bit later. But first, I recommend that for each map, you look at which wrist device matters, and what you should bring for a run, as in a map like Chinatown, there's a lot more close corridors. A shockwave device might be a lot more useful than a rocket device, and vice versa on a map like Skid Row, where there are a lot of open areas. And now you may say this doesn't matter, as I can bring one on each hand, making it fine no matter what map I'm on. And here's what I say to that. You're wrong. As at first it may seem you are set for every situation, you're going to find yourself burning through a lot more device charges on one device than the other, meaning if you want to use a shockwave charge, oh wait, I'm out of shockwave charges. Guess I'll have to use a wrist rocket instead. Having the same device on both hands effectively doubles your ammo, so just bring 2 of one, okay? But not only do you have to make sure that you are bringing the right one for each situation, some maps have large areas and close quarter hallways. So this is where maybe divide your team up so that you have 3 bringing wrist rockets and 1 bringing both shockwaves, making your team a lot more versatile. Now finally, to end off this tip, is the reason why wrist devices are so important, even though you can't stun common infected, is, wait for it, the shockwave does 600 damage, and I don't know how much the wrist rockets do, but it seems they do just a bit lower. But when combined with a rage booster, that's a lot of DPS. as that equals 1,200 damage per use. And you can pretty much spam them, so if you need to literally get out of a bad situation, you can spam them and get out really easily, which makes wrist devices your best friend in these horror runs. Tip 4 is to do with weapon choice, because as I stated literally a sentence ago, common infected can't be stunned, meaning high damage weapons are key to surviving in this mode. So dust off your MT and upgrade those revolvers. We got a lot of damage that needs doing. Basically, if the gun does a lot of damage per shot, they are pretty much meta for this mode. Guns like the MT, the shotgun, the LMG, and revolver are going to probably find a slot in your loadout. But that doesn't mean some guns like the service pistols and Tommy gun can't too. Because if you cast your mind back a few updates ago, they made it so blue ammo weapons have a 30% increase to common infected, but a 30% decrease to special infected. Now, the latter decrease doesn't really matter when most players are going to be running 3 guns of different ammo types. Meaning, if you want to bring a Tommy gun that does 78 damage to normal infected, go for it. But unfortunately, some guns don't do a lot of damage and are practically useless in horror mode, aka my pride and joy, the SMG. Moving on to my 5th and final tip, which is, drumroll please, grab every single item you can, as you can't really have too many. This means checking every single location Iceman can spawn, opening every single locked drawer, and obviously opening up locked keycard rooms. As starting in the Shock and Awe update, they can now contain items like the Warhead and device charging, so I recommend opening them. Now, I don't mean go looking into every room for items, as some rooms contain triggers for hordes, and if you want to survive in horror mode, you can't activate some of these. So this is where a bit of game sense comes in, as I hope by the time you decide to do a horror run, you've learned what rooms are useful and where triggers for hordes are. And that is really all for horror mode, as it doesn't really change much other than being a lot more punishing for simple mistakes. So try not to beat yourself up if you failed a run. Just look back and see what went wrong. Not only for your team, but also where maybe you could have done something different, as that is the spirit of horror mode. Now this isn't the intro yet, so don't go clicking off the video. There's still a bit that I want to cover. And what I mean by this is I'm making a channel in my Discord. So obviously the link is going to be in the description. So go click there if you want to join. But yeah, I'm going to be making a channel in my Discord where you can upload and send me videos of your runs. You can upload them to YouTube and then send the links there if you want. And I'll be doing a video where I review potential mistakes and also explain where you played well. I'm looking forward to some submissions, and now this is the outro for the video. If you've enjoyed or learned something, like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the line. Peace.